Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this one's going to be a fun one. This happens to be a 2022 Subaru Impreza, but to be fair, this video is about more than just this car. Now it is about this car, and if you want to see it, it's here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, and I'm going to film it so you have a good idea of what it's about. But this is really about how Subaru does everything differently, and how for the most part, that's actually better. It's a lot more under the skin than you think. And if you're interested in a Subaru, this video is for you because it should give you a pretty good idea of what Subaru is doing, at least with their gas vehicles, except for the BRZ, and give you a pretty good idea of why Subaru does things differently and why that might or might not be better for you. So again, we're filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. If you have questions about this car or any car in its class, make sure you let me know in the comment section and subscribe, because I'll write you back in the comment section, and I will also look at those comments and make future videos from those comments to help you have sort of a video database of information on this car, other cars in its class. But for now, let's keep rolling through and talk about why Subaru does things differently, what they do differently, and why it might be better for you. So the very first thing we have to talk about with Subarus, the majority of Subarus, is the engine. And you might be thinking, well, let's talk about their symmetrical all-wheel drive first, because that's really what they're known for, but that actually comes out of the engine. So while most cars in this class and most vehicles in the Subaru lineup have 4-cylinder engines or 6-cylinder engines, the 4-cylinder is usually aligned with 4 cylinders right about here, and they move up and down. That's a regular car. The 6-cylinder, same thing. You'd have a V6 on most cars. Subaru does things differently, and it shows well on this car because it's got a pretty low hood. So instead of having 4 cylinders up and down that come up and down, the pistons go up and down, they actually mount them like this. So you have 2 cylinders on this side and 2 cylinders on this side. That lowers the center of gravity for the engine. Now, if you think about Subaru, most of their cars, or at least most of their well-known cars, aren't like this sedan. They're actually raised up cars that look like crossovers, and they kind of created that class because one of the benefits that Subaru has is the design of their engine lowers the center of gravity. So you could raise it on the suspension and have the same center of gravity, and you had what's called car-like handling, which is kind of their thing. Car-like handling even on raised vehicles. Now what it does on this vehicle is gives you more sports car-like handling, which is how we came into the WRX being such a sports car, even though it looks kind of like a souped up economy car. Center of gravity is a really big piece of that engine. Now the other thing it does, because you have the pistons coming in and out on the sides, it creates a drive shaft that comes out the center, and instead of being sort of front wheel drive where things kind of hook around differently, it can run a drive shaft straight through the center to the rear wheels, and then you have equal length drive shafts in the front and equal length drive shafts in the rear. Most all-wheel drive, in fact, every other all-wheel drive vehicle you can buy in Canada today that has an all-wheel drive system without a boxer engine does not have equal drive shafts front and rear. And what that means is when you give it the gas on a front-wheel drive car, your car may electronically correct for it now, but the reality is when you give it the gas on a front-wheel drive car or a car with front-wheel drive and a front engine, one wheel is going to receive a little bit more torque than the other because of the unequal drive shafts, which can cause you to steer weird. Now most cars, they tune that out, they direct it all out through electronics or through other sort of mechanical ways, but the reality is the simplest system to lower the center of gravity and give you equal drive shafts, which gives you equal power to all wheels, is a mechanical one. It's not corrected by electronics, and Subaru does that well. Now, to be fair, most other all-wheel drive vehicles have caught up as far as winter traction, but mechanically, from the beginning, this is a better system to give you equal length drive shafts. Now, when you have the equal length drive shafts here, you also have the ability to have your suspension stretch longer into the car. What that does is has the ability to give you longer suspension travel and more precise suspension travel than you would have in a typical vehicle, which is exactly why we go back to these raised up Subarus, because they could have that really long suspension travel. Even though they're raised up a few inches, they actually often have much more travel than your typical SUV. What it does in a car like this, center of gravity low, center of mass to the center, better handling. So there's your quick overview of some of the things they do in the engine and drivetrain. Let's go through to the trunk, look at one little thing different there, and then we're gonna move to the driver's seat and talk about a lot of the differences they do inside the car that also change the way this car handles, change the way they think about safety. There's a whole bunch of really cool things, so let's start there. So most of the popular Subarus actually have a wagons type style back end here, and the reason they do that is they're all about practicality and maximizing trunk space. What you have here in the sedan is something that you don't typically see on a car of this price class. These arms on most cars will crush your luggage. You can load this vehicle completely full, and because these arms are covered, it won't crush your luggage. Now that's not exclusive to Subaru, but it is something that you rarely find in this class. And if you're on a big camping trip or something like that where you're loading luggage in, you can know that you can load this up and you will not crack an iPad the second you shut this down because you had an iPad in the top of their bag. It's a minor thing, but it is a thing. The other thing you have here, of course, is a backup camera. That's required by law. You have beepers back here, or sonar sensors back here, which can give you beeping as you approach something. We're going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward, but I want to show you something in the windshield as well before we go forward to talk about one of the differences as well. So I brought those sonar sensors in the back up for a reason, because that allows the car to sense when you're backing up if it should stop or emergency stop all on its own. Out front you have a camera here, and you have an identical camera on the other side of the mirror. On a traditional car, nowadays, when you have a similar system, you have a little V camera in the center above the mirror. You have one camera, but this has two cameras, one there and one over there. I want to talk about that really quickly because the rear sensors and this do some of the same things. So let's talk about that. So why do two cameras matter instead of one? Well, if you think about how we see, we use our eyes. Left side and right side. Because we look at things from two different angles, our brains are able to tell depth. If you try to catch a ball, don't try to do this, it's a bad idea, trust me, you'll get a black eye. But if you try to catch a ball with one eye covered, it's much more difficult because your depth perception is gone. So what Subaru does is, instead of using a single camera with a crazy amount of software and often a radar plate to make up for things, they can use their two camera system to sense depth perception, and that can give you the autonomous emergency braking that is now standard on many vehicles. Subaru's been doing this for a while with their own system, and because it's a simpler system, using just cameras from a different angle, it's actually very effective, and I think in some cases it can be a better system. Those rear backup beepers, they also have the ability to stop it automatically when you're backing up. So again, simple is the key. A simple engine design gives you a simpler mechanical advantage for the all-wheel drive system and lower center of gravity. A simple dual camera system, although it takes up some space inside, which we'll show you, gives you a better, simpler perspective view for depth perception in front of you. And that does more than just help stop the car. While we're out here, steering responsive headlights is an option on this car. It's standard on the car we're looking at today. What that means is that on this price class, the steering wheel can actually turn your headlights as well, so they are steering responsive headlights. You can turn that on or off, but that's not, again, something you typically see in this class. Subaru does things differently, which is pretty cool. Let's drop into the driver's seat now and take a look at some of the things they do there. So before we hop in, I usually just show you the key first at this point in my video. You can see Subaru has their sort of logo as the lock button. You have a trunk button, a lock button, an unlock button, and the panic button down there. It is a little bit of a thicker key, but it's well designed so it fits fine in your pocket. That's the key. Normally at this point in my videos, I show you the rear seat. I'm just gonna give you a quick glance here. I fit fine in this. It's not overly fantastic or overly poor. I'd like to see a pocket there. I'd like to see vents and USB ports there. I don't see them. I only have one pocket there. So there's not a ton to talk about in the back seat, but there is a lot to talk about in the front seat. So let's just do that right now. Jumping in here. All right, lots to show you. First of all, very comfortable seats in every Subaru. A lot of small cars will have small seats. I don't know if you can see it here in the video, but they do seem to be just a tiny bit longer, which is something that I like. It gives me more comfort. You have standard seat type controls there, powered seat here, and again, good lumbar support. Again, or good side-to-side support there, not lumbar, but bolsters there. The bolsters help keep you in the seat when you're going around corners, and of course, because this car has a lower center of gravity than many in its class, it actually is quite fun around corners. So there is that. You get that in just about every Subaru. The other thing you get, and we're going to try to show you on camera, which is pretty impossible to do, every single Subaru, the same with the mechanical advantage of the engine. A lot of cars are giving you lots of cameras to give you great visibility. One thing you'll find in every Subaru is you have really good visibility. You've got a big extra window there, narrow pillars here, and if we look around the whole outside, even for a sedan, this is a very good view sedan, so you can really see out of it well. It doesn't show on camera like it would in person, and again, if you're jumping in any Subaru, you're going to find visibility is excellent. So let's take a look at the dash now, because you're going to have some typical stuff here. We're going to have a push button start, which we're going to tap right there with my foot on the brake. Of course, that starts the car up. And one thing you'll find with the Subaru, they tend to rev a little bit more when they're cold. It just seems like it makes a little bit more noise than I would like when it's cold. Once it warms up, that's fine. And again, one of the things Subaru does differently here is they give you that little blue light right there in the dash. It looks like my finger's covering it, but it's not. There we go, blue light in the dash. That just tells you, hey, the engine's not warmed up yet. That's why I'm revving a little bit high. That's what's going on. Now you're seeing some glare here. Again, I don't really see that glare in person, but anytime I film a screen with this camera, you're going to see some glare. We probably will move to show you this display because that is sitting in the sun and it doesn't, although I can see it fine, it doesn't film well with the angle we're going at. So first of all, let's just come back out here a little bit. Very typical dash in here. That blue light turned off, the engine died down, and it's actually, whoops, go the wrong way. It's actually much quieter now. So again, sits around 1,000 RPM, completely silent, or very silent for a gasoline vehicle, of course, very good. So you've got typical stuff in here, typical gauges that are easy to see, easy to read, and you know, the digital dash, which has a number of features. A lot of this is kind of the same stuff, but let's just show you the steering wheel for a second because there's a lot going on, and I mean that in a good way. So first of all, like we talked about those steering responsive headlights. We'll look at the buttons down here. Just a couple little buttons down here. You can turn your blind spot monitoring off. Let's just quickly talk about blind spot monitoring before we get to steering wheel. If I touch this button here, you're going to see, if we can get up to the mirror here, that light. Let me just come out a little bit here. So there we go. You can see the whole mirror. Right on the side here is what I want you to look at. Hopefully this will work here. There we go. Turn it off, and we're going to turn it back on. See that orange light there? Instead of having an orange light in your mirror, it has an orange light on the inside of your mirror. That's again something that Subaru does differently. It's very clear, and because it's closer to you and larger, it can be seen in your peripheral vision. So when you're driving the car here, you can see that light up, which will warn you if someone is in your blind spot. It's a better system than putting the little dinky little tiny light out there where you have to really take your eyes off the road in front of you to see it there. So just a little difference there. Now let's talk about this steering wheel. First of all, it's tilt and telescopic. Let's put it farther away from the camera to give you a better view here. And where's the lock button? There we go. Okay, so we'll take a look there. Now, Subaru has a whole lot going on with their steering wheel, but I actually kind of appreciate it because a lot of cars bury controls in here that you would need to use regularly, and this one doesn't do that. So what you have here is paddle shifters on the right and the left here, or right here and left there. Just something that you should be aware of. They're good size, well located, they're fine. Then you have your typical audio and volume controls, your source, and then your information, which we're going to talk about in a second. Then you have your Bluetooth controls, which are clearly separated, and then you have down here, which you can grab with your fingers, your cruise control. So that's pretty, or the setting is of various settings, so not cruise control, excuse me. Then you have over here all of your cruise control settings, which on a modern car is this and this, but it can include this button. Now again, most vehicles with the smart cruise control have one button here where you have to, when you're in cruise, you use those bars to create the distance of how far you want to be behind the other vehicle. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just bear with me. In most cars, you have one setting which cycles 1, 2, 3, 4 closer and then goes back to the top and comes back down. And that can cause a lot of braking and acceleration in busy traffic. This one, you can move it down or you can move it up bit by bit. It creates a smoother drive when you're on smart cruise control. So again, it's going to keep the distance between you and the vehicle in front of you, but you can really adapt exactly what you want without having to cycle through a menu of getting way closer, jamming on the brakes, and getting way farther. So really smart that you can go up or down. Very few cars do this because they want to limit their buttons. Then you have a sort of a lane keeping type system. Again, those two cameras, let's take a look at them up here. This little camera here and that little camera there. Instead of one little camera in the center, two cameras here that can look at the road, and they can also find the lane markers that can help keep your vehicle centered in the lane. Now, interestingly, although these take up a little bit of space inside and you can kind of see them, normally you lose visibility in this section on a modern car. You don't lose that here with Subaru's system, and again, it just gives the perception of greater vision. It's hard to show on camera, but it is there. So you've got extra buttons there, and then you have a steering wheel heater, which is located exactly where you would want it, right down there, which I can't really show you because I got my right hand on the wheel, but imagine my hand's on the wheel. You can easily touch it with your fingers. It's easy to operate. There's a little lighted button on there, which you can't see because it's a nice bright day, but it is there. I can see it better in person than you can see it on camera, so you know your steering wheel heater is on. So good stuff there. And then what you have is a screen system over here. Well, let's just move the car now to a different spot so we can show you some of the screens with a little bit less glare. All right, we did park in a different spot, and I'm going to be really honest with you. There's still some glare on camera here, but we're not in the direct sunlight. So you know, hopefully you understand that what you're seeing on camera is far more glare than what I'm seeing in person. This is a normal screen. We're going to come back to that in a second. I want to look at that screen up there because that acts like a heads-up display. Again, it's hard to see it in your camera view, but it's very much in your peripheral vision as we're driving here. So we're going to take a quick zoom into that screen there. Hopefully we can get focus on it. There we go. All right, so when you look at that screen, first of all, look at the brake lights on the car. As soon as I touch the brake lights, you can see your brake lights are on. It's a very precise control. Let's just try turning the headlights on as well. Yep, there you go. You can see your headlights turn on and off as well. So very smart system here that controls, you know, just a really good display screen here. So there's a lot of controls in here. Basically what it's telling you is your automatic headlights are on, your automatic crash prevention is on, which uses your eyesight camera. That's what underneath the 2 there, that's what that is. This tells you your lane keep is on. Rear automatic braking is not turned on right now, but blind spot detection is. So at a glance, you can see your safety features are on or off. If we go to the backup camera, we'll go into reverse here. That stays the same, but now the rear automatic braking is on because we're in reverse. And then that's your backup camera right there, which is super clear, which you can also see your rear automatic braking. You can cycle it on and off while you're in reverse, which will be the beepers as well as stop. You can turn the beepers on and off on that screen. So again, where is it? There we go. There we go. So that's your screen there. So we should have come out there. Maybe we can do that. So there's your backup camera, very clear, very good. But let's go back up to this top screen here. So as we go up there, you have things that are within your control, and it's a really good display. So now, again, nobody really uses this screen, and nobody does it the way Subaru does. So we can cycle through some of the information in here. This one is your sort of front to back lean angle, and this one gives you that, what I was talking about at the beginning of the video. Because your engine is centralized, that drive shaft comes out the center. Normally, to connect back to your front wheel drive, it would have a piece off here and forward. Let me just see. You can sort of see like off here and forward, which would create unequal drive shafts. So you can see that symmetry in your all-wheel drive system there. And again, if you don't know what you're looking at, just trust me, this is different and this is better. But a little extra display there that kind of gives you your angles and that kind of thing, sort of an off-road, all-wheel drive type display, which of course you're not taking this vehicle off-road anyways. Cycle through here as well. There's your water temperature, which is normal, oil temperature, so just little things like that. Average speed is 1 kilometer an hour. You can tell I've been creeping around a parking lot here, which is not going to go well for fuel efficiency when we get to that point. Then we have your radio station. If you want to have your radio down here, you can, but you can also have it up there. And what that does is frees up this screen for other things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. We'll talk about that in a second as well. So then you have things down here. Fuel efficiency, like I said, just ignore it because I've been idling, but very good display up there. And then you have just the date and calendar, that kind of thing, and then an information section where we can hit more buttons. So I really like some of those displays up there because it enables you to have a smaller screen here that gives you all the information you need. Effective screen real estate in this car is very good. Very good color display there, very good color display there, and very good color display here. So let's just go over here. You have AM, FM satellite in this car, but if you want to do your Apple CarPlay or your Android Auto, which are in your apps here, you can allow it to take over that clean, full screen and still have the extra information up over there. Now, again, in the camera, that looks very small, but to your eyes, it looks very, very good and lines up very nicely. So a lot of good stuff in there. Overall, let's just take a quick look while we're here. Automatic climate control, so we can hit the auto button, whatever temperature you want. It'll keep it at hot or cold. Little difference here as well, if you can kind of see it there. You've got 2 USB ports. I'm trying to get the focus on there, that are really stacked together. Normally you would only have 1 in that space, so 2 USB ports, a 12-volt port. I'm focusing on this by accident. Automatic transmission. The other thing that's kind of cool is a lot of people have moved away from these physical buttons. They sort of touch on and they turn back off. This one, if you press it down like that in the high setting on your heated seats, rump roasters as I like to call them, it will stay in position, which in the winter is very nice to get in the car, start the car and drive, not get in the car, start the car, turn on your heated steering wheel, turn on your heated seat. You know, it just takes a few steps out when you're driving in the winter. You always want to start the car with your heated seat on, so why not just leave it on like that? So really smart there. So again, let's just jump out. Actually, let's just show you one quick little thing that they do that I don't like as we scroll all the way up. We'll show you the controls up here because there are some. Subaru's centralized all of their controls pretty much everywhere, but because this is eyesight based, some of that lane keeping and the forward collision, they have physical buttons to turn them off up here. So to Subaru that makes sense because it's this thing that's doing it, but to a driver I don't think it makes sense to look for driving controls up where the sunroof controls are. So it is something to point out there. That's interesting. Again, GM has their OnStar. A lot of cars are having a similar competitive system. Subaru has their system here as well. So something's there. So that's one thing I don't like is the driving controls are up here. But again, you're probably never going to have to turn those off. So you just leave them where they are. All right, let's just jump out for a second. So normally at this point in my review, I talk about who should buy a Subaru and who shouldn't buy a Subaru, and we'll probably get to that, but let's talk about why Subaru does things differently, and where it's coming from is a thing that I really like. So many cars nowadays are in a copycat type system where, you know, the actual parts and components are actually made by a standard company. For instance, Magna International is a Canadian company. They're like the 5th largest automaker in the world, and they don't really make any cars. They might make one car now, but they make so many different components. So when you have cameras that are cars that use a single camera in the front, that's likely a shared component made by all sorts of different, or made by one manufacturer for all sorts of different cars, and it kind of makes every car the same. Where Subaru does things smart is what I like. They take an engine, and instead of adapting a complicated system to give you the functions you need, they start from a simpler area. A boxer engine creates a symmetrical all-wheel drive, creates an even drivetrain that helps you in snow. Now, modern electronics can compensate, and that's why Subaru's symmetrical all-wheel drive really doesn't have a massive technical advantage from the driver's seat over, over other makes now, because all the wheels can slip and grip and that kind of thing with wheel speed sensors on every car. But you start from a place where it has to do less mechanical work, less thinking, that kind of thing. Then you have the same thing with the eyesight system. The 2 eyes is a simpler system. Then you have the same thing with visibility. It's funny how the visibility on cars each generation has creeped less and less and less, and we've compensated by more and more cameras. I used to drive a Hyundai Santa Cruz. I love that thing, but without the 360 camera, I really didn't have any 3/4 back to rear visibility at all. It was terrible. It was like a Lamborghini as far as that goes. Really no rearward visibility. This car's got great forward visibility, great rearward visibility, and it is something you see when you jump into a Subaru compared to anything else in its class. Whether it's this model or one of the wagon models or an SUV type model, you really notice that visibility. So by doing things differently, Subaru is making a difference, and that's why they have such good loyalty. It's hard to go from a Subaru to something that gives you less. Now, it's not perfect. They could still learn from other companies. Their screen, you know, it doesn't have some of the easy to use software that I would like. It's not that it's hard to use, but it will take an owner a little bit extra time to learn, whereas, you know, some cars you can get in and on the test drive you have it pretty much figured out. But let's talk about who should drive a Subaru now. If you're looking for a vehicle that is engaging to drive within its class and has great safety, Subaru should be among the top of their list. They do things differently. That visibility is a big thing. The low center of gravity is also good. Now, if you are an outdoorsy person, Subaru's marketing really targets you. And frankly, on a lot of their raised up vehicles with great style roof racks that actually have some uniqueness in there as well, Subaru is probably, or should probably be at the top of your list there as well, because they really are good with bike racks and kayak racks and other stuff. Their interior storage is very good. They've got a lot of smart design for an outdoorsy type person, and that includes that engine design that can allow for better suspension travel and that engaging vehicle to drive. Again, they've got that low center of gravity, which makes a vehicle that sits a little taller just as engaging to drive as a normal height vehicle. And this vehicle, which sits a little lower or sits normal height, has the center of gravity of a vehicle just a little lower, which again makes it more engaging to drive. Subarus are also good for having very good technology, but it doesn't always feel like it has great technology. A lot of their technology works behind the scenes, and when you get in, it can feel a little dated compared to some of the big, huge screens, where everything is a touch screen. Personally, although I don't love the look of buttons everywhere, I think buttons are oftentimes more functional, and the way Subaru separates their screens instead of putting it all into one big screen actually gives you a more functional environment to work in than a big screen that can get, for instance, fully taken over by Apple CarPlay or by Android Auto and some of the other tech type features. So safety, if that matters to you, off-road ability in some of their vehicles, if that matters to you, these are really good as well. But the biggest thing is a Subaru does things differently. It's easy to drive, and when you sit in this car, I think you'll know if you like it or not, and that's the point. If you're here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals in Fredericton, New Brunswick, make sure you swing by and check out this Subaru along with the other ones and compare them to the class to see if it's right for you. There are plenty of good reasons to buy other other cars as well. But I think Subaru's onto something. I think Subaru does something really, really well with the overall packaging. What's going to be interesting is now that things are moving to EVs, Subaru has paired with Toyota on their latest EV, and they may be losing some of that individualness. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. But right now, Subaru has something unique, whether it looks like it or not, and it's definitely worth checking out. Thanks everybody for watching.